Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into a world where the concept of fine dining meant gnawing on a crust of bread so hard it could double as a roof tile, where spices weren't just flavor enhancers, they were wealth power and survival. Imagine sitting down to a bowl of boiled weeds and calling it soup, or watching your neighbor chew on a lump of gristle that had been stewing for 3 days straight. That's medieval cuisine for you. And no, it wasn't about hearty roasts and golden loaves fresh from the oven. It was about survival, not satisfaction. Food was either a symbol of status so grand it could bankrupt you, or so bleak you might just weep into your bowl. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little village of ours has spread across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a one-room cottage, head pressed against a lumpy sack of straw, and the first thing that hits you isn't the rooster crowing, but the smell. Damp wool, wood smoke, and something vaguely sour. Your stomach growls, but you know there's no hearty breakfast waiting. There's no bacon sizzling, no fresh coffee brewing. You get bread. Maybe. And if you're lucky, it isn't green with mold. The bread in your hand is hard, really hard. They called it trencher bread. It's yesterday's loaf, or maybe the day before's, used as both plate and food. You knock it against the wooden table. It thuds. People didn't waste food in the Middle Ages, even if it had doubled as a plate for someone else's stew. After the rich ate from it, the bread would be given to the poor or the dogs. This is what you've got. Breakfast of champions. You sit with your family around a low wooden table, and there's not much talking. Eating is a quiet business. Everyone focuses on chewing and swallowing what little there is. A bit of onion, a turnip if it's in season, porridge thickened with millet or rye, lumpy and dull. No sugar, of course. Sugar is for kings and bishops. You're a peasant. You sweeten things, if at all, with honey when there is any. Most days there isn't. You step outside and see your neighbor, Old Tom, already gnawing on something that looks suspiciously like salted fish. He's missing half his teeth, so he gums it thoughtfully. Fish was a staple when meat wasn't available, which was often, but only if you lived near the coast or a river. For many, the only regular source of protein came from beans and peas, which also meant frequent pungent flatulence. The medieval diet wasn't just bland, it was biologically loud. But let's say, for the sake of experience, that today is Sunday. The Sabbath. That means you might get meat. Just a little. You walk to the village green and you smell it before you see it, something roasting on a spit. Your mouth waters instinctively, but you know better than to get excited. That roast belongs to the lord of the manor, not to you. You'll get the scraps, maybe a sliver of fat, a bone to gnaw. The hierarchy of eating was clear and cruel. The lord dines upstairs in his great hall. His bread is white, sifted fine through cloth made from wheat. Yours is coarse, dark, full of husks made from rye or barley, or even acorns during bad years. His table is laid with peacocks and pastries while you make do with cabbage and broth. You see, what someone ate was a direct reflection of their status. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was a badge of your place in the world. Even in monasteries where austerity was preached, the monks ate better than the average peasant. They had access to herbs, gardens, fish ponds, even occasional meat. You think of joining a monastery for the food alone, but don't forget that means praying 7 times a day and sleeping on wooden boards. Also, no wives. You weigh the pros and cons. You return home for the main meal of the day, dinner. It's around midday, and again the offering is familiar. A pottage thick, gloopy, and endlessly adaptable. Today it's made from leeks and barley. The same as yesterday. You chew slowly because once it's gone, it's gone. Supper won't be much better, maybe some leftover pottage thinned with butter or bread dipped in ale. Yes, ale. Everyone drinks it. Water is often unsafe and weak ale is given to children and adults alike. Not to get drunk, but to stay alive. You think about growing your own food. You do. Everyone does. But between rent owed to the Lord Church tithes and the occasional bad harvest, your yield is pitiful. Sometimes, to stretch it, you grind tree bark into flour. It's bitter. It gives you cramps. But it fills you up. You've heard stories of people eating clay or dirt during famines. You believe it. And don't get too excited about markets. They're a luxury. And they're heavily taxed. A chicken costs more than you make in a week. Spices, forget it. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, they're imported from Asia and worth more than gold. You wouldn't even know what they taste like. You've heard of people being executed for adulterating spices or selling fake saffron. That's how serious it was. There's a traveling peddler in town today, and he has something that makes your eyes widen: cheese. Real cheese. Hard, yellow, sharp. It smells like feet, but it's magnificent. You trade a sack of onions for a wedge the size of your palm. Tonight's supper will be a feast. Bread, a smear of lard, and cheese. You'll go to bed full. Maybe. But then you remember the saying, full bellies breed rebellion. That's why the system keeps you just hungry enough to work, but never enough to question. You look up at the manor house, see the smoke curling from its chimney, and smell roast goose. Your mouth waters. You chew your bread, swallow slowly, and remind yourself food is for the living. Hunger is for the poor. Your stomach groans again as evening falls. You dip your trencher into the cold remains of the morning's pottage. A single beet leaf floats in it. You eat in silence. And when you finally lay down to sleep, you dream of fruit. Real fruit. Not dried apple slices or the occasional berry, but melons, oranges, figs. You've never seen them, of course, but someone somewhere gets to eat them. You drift off with your hands on your belly, which is never quite full, and your last thought is of warm bread, golden crusts, and honey dripping like sunlight. But that is not your world, not here, not in the Middle Ages. And tomorrow it all begins again. The morning mist curls over the damp earth as you step outside again, clutching a bowl of gruel that's more water than meal. It's cold today, bone-deep cling to your fingernails cold, and you can feel every breath in your lungs like you're inhaling through cloth. Breakfast, if you can call it that, doesn't warm you. It barely settles your stomach. You look down into the bowl and stir it again, hoping to discover something new, maybe a forgotten oat, a speck of turnip, anything. But no. It's just gruel, and it tastes like despair. Your teeth hurt again. You don't know why, maybe the bread may be rot. Dental hygiene is a fantasy in this world. You chew through crust after crust, knowing every bite could crack something. You don't complain. There's no one to complain to. Everyone around you is equally tired, equally sore, equally aware that the day ahead will require more energy than this meal gives you. But that's life. And food, such as it is just a burden to endure. The children next door are crying again. You hear the mother cooing softly, offering them sips of cabbage water and stale bread soaked in ale. She's doing her best, and the children are small enough to believe it's something special. But they'll learn soon. Everyone does. Childhood ends when you realize that food isn't about joy, it's about survival and sometimes punishment. Punishment came in many forms, and food was one of them. If you were in a prison, whether a castle dungeon or a church-run jail, you'd be lucky to get crusts. Bread and water, the classic cliché, was real and deadly. Waterborne illness meant the water could kill you faster than starvation, and the bread was usually infested with mold. But they didn't care. The punishment wasn't just being locked up, it was being forced to eat like an animal until you either repented, perished, or both. And if you were caught stealing food, the penalties were brutal. A hand chopped off, a flogging in the square, stocks for days during which passers-by could throw their scraps or worse at you. A child who stole a turnip to feed their sister might never walk straight again. The law wasn't kind. It existed to protect the food of the powerful, not feed the mouths of the weak. But even outside of punishment, food was a constant tightrope. Eat too little and you'd collapse in the fields. Eat too much if you could even manage it, and you'd be accused of gluttony, a sin. And not just in moral sermons. The church had opinions on food. Oh, they had many. Fasting wasn't just spiritual, it was calendar-based and required. Lent alone stripped meat, dairy, and eggs from your table for 40 days. In theory, this was about discipline and devotion. In practice, it meant the poor ate even less than usual, and the rich paid for expensive fish dishes dressed up to look like meat anyway. Mock goose made of almonds, eel pies shaped like chickens, because God might be watching, but wealth could always find a loophole. You remember the old widow who lived by the chapel, Agnes. She once fed you a warm carrot broth on a feast day, and it tasted like comfort. She said she added marigold petals for color. But even then, she warned you not to enjoy it too much. God watches the heart, she said, and food too rich makes the soul lazy. You nodded because you didn't understand, but now you do. Indulgence was dangerous, not just for the body, but for your eternal fate. Food marked everything: feast and famine, holiness and sin, loyalty and rebellion. When kings wanted to impress nobles or send a message, they didn't deliver speeches. They threw banquets, tables piled with glazed swans, elaborately sculpted pies, towers of sugared fruit no one from your village had ever tasted. These displays weren't about nourishment, they were theater. You might be invited to stand outside watching the guests file in, catching glimpses of roasted boar and silver platters. But you would never taste any of it. And sometimes the extravagance killed. King Henry I, they say, died from a surfeit of lampreys. A fish so rich, so fatty, it overwhelmed his stomach. But he couldn't resist. A king's weakness laid bare by the very food that symbolized his power. And you'd die from not enough food. He died from too much. The contrast stings. Still, you keep eating what you have. Barley, oats, turnips, things that grow easily in poor soil. You've learned to stretch every ingredient. Dandelions in soup, pig fat rubbed on crusts for flavor. You boil bones until they turn to jelly, then reboil them again. Nothing is wasted. Not because you're frugal, but because you have no choice. Then there's the bread again. Always the bread. The village miller takes a cut of your grain every time you grind it. The Lord takes his cut too. By the time you bake your loaves, they're half the flour you started with. That's why your bread is so rough, so full of grit. Sometimes you think it's the bread itself wearing your teeth down, and the flour not always safe. Millstones sometimes shed grit. Sometimes they grind in with bits of bark dust or even insects. You pick through the dough before baking, hoping to avoid the worst, but accidents happen. You've bitten down on something that cracked a molar more than once, and still you eat. You pass the blacksmith on your way back from the fields, and he's gnawing on a sausage. The smell makes your mouth water. You exchange a glance. He tears off a piece and tosses it to you with a nod. It's not fresh and it's mostly fat and gristle, but it's meat. Real meat. You thank him, tear off a bite and chew slowly, trying to make it last. The salt stings your tongue. Salt, precious, coveted. It preserved meat and fish, making them last through harsh winters and lean summers. Salt could be currency, a dowry, a dowel of power. Wars had been fought over salt, and here you are tasting it like a blessing. But that's the rare moment. Most meals are bland, gray, repetitive. They're fuel, not pleasure. And even then, they sometimes turn on you. Ergot, a fungus that infects rye. Invisible, deadly. When it contaminates your bread, it doesn't warn you. You eat, and then the symptoms begin. Burning limbs, hallucinations, madness. Some call it St. Anthony's fire. Others think it's witchcraft. But it's bread. Bread you baked with your own hands. Food becomes poison, and you realize that in this world, even a good meal can be your undoing. Still, you rise each morning, belly rumbling, mouth dry, tongue thick from salt and stale crumbs. You scrape together the day's meal. You wait for the next fast. You dream of the next feast. You chew slowly. You swallow hard. And always you wonder, will tonight's supper keep you alive or break you? Will tomorrow bring hunger or plague, or a rare turnip windfall? There's no knowing. All you can do is eat and pray. The days bleed together like porridge into broth, one indistinguishable from the next, and the taste never seems to change. Your teeth ache, your belly groans, and still you eat. Because you must. Because to refuse food even when it's gray and bitter is to walk willingly toward death. And death in this world never needs an invitation. It's always close enough to smell the pot. Today you're foraging. Not for adventure or for fun. This isn't some romantic walk through the woods. You're hunting calories. The grain store is low. Last year's harvest didn't stretch, and there are still weeks until the next. You pull your hood tight and step off the path, scanning the earth with eyes trained by hunger. You know what to look for: nettles, sorrel, dandelions, ground elder. Greens that can bulk out a stew, soften a crust of bread, or trick your belly into feeling full. You find a patch of nettles and pause. They'll sting your fingers, but you don't flinch. You gather them carefully, humming a little tune the old woman taught you something about nettles in May, keeping hunger away. You don't believe in spells, but you believe in food, and that's close enough. Later, back at your hearth, the leaves boil down into something dark and slimy. You mix in oats, some barley flour, a handful of dried peas. It's thick and sticky, a texture more than a flavor. But it fills the pot. And that's what matters. You serve it in wooden bowls, no spoons, just fingers and crusts. The children slurp, smearing green along their chins. And for a moment, there's something like peace. You allow yourself a sip. It tastes like grass and dirt and effort. It's not good, but it's not bad enough to leave behind. That night, someone tells you of a new herb found in the woods, something the priest's cook called wild mustard. It's sharp, they say, peppery. The idea of flavor sends a jolt through your chest. Not sweetness, not salt, but a sting on the tongue, a hint of life. You make a note to search for it tomorrow, but not everyone is foraging. Across the village, the reeve prepares for the manor feast. You hear the clatter of knives, the thud of a butcher's cleaver. A pig has been slaughtered. You smell it roasting on a spit mixed with apples and onions. The scent curls through the village like smoke winding its way into every hovel, curling beneath every door, tormenting the air itself. The feast is for the tax collectors. Once a year, the manor hosts them. You're not invited, but you hear tales, spiced wine, pies shaped like castles, custards the color of sunrise, and puddings steamed with dried fruit. Honey-glazed birds arranged to look like they were still flying. And the bread, oh the bread, soft white sifted 3 times baked in ovens that never run out of wood. It's obscene, and yet you crave it. You remember the time you were brought to the kitchen to sweep ashes. You were 12. The cook tossed you a scrap of pastry crust. It was cold, flaky, and coated in grease, and you swallowed it so fast you nearly choked. That memory returns now like a vision. The crust was nothing. It was garbage. But to you, it was sacred. The next morning, the leftover bones from the feast are thrown out. Some go to the dogs. Others are stolen by the boldest children. A knuckle here, a marrow-rich slice of femur there. You manage to snag one run behind the blacksmith's hut and chew the end until the flavor is gone. You suck the bone like a secret. This is how food moves in your world, not just as sustenance, but as hierarchy. Who eats what they eat, how much, and when? It's never fair. It's never shared. It's a performance one that keeps the powerful fed and the powerless quiet. You go back to your garden. The soil is stubborn, the spring rains haven't come. Your carrots are stunted, your beans slow to sprout. You add manure, turn the earth prey for clouds. If the crop fails, you know what comes next. Famine. And famine is a thief. It takes slowly at first, then all at once. You've seen it happen. The neighbor's wife who wasted away over a winter. The child whose belly swelled grotesquely before he stopped crying altogether. The old man who ate grass until his stomach turned inside out. Famine teaches you which plants are edible, which bark can be ground into paste, which roots don't kill quickly. You also learn about famine bread. Not bread at all, really. A mix of straw chaff, dried roots, and husks ground down and shaped into something resembling a loaf. You eat it slowly. It binds your insides. It keeps you alive. It doesn't love you. In times of desperation, some even boil leather. They say the tannins leach into the broth and make it chewable. You tried it once. It was like eating your shoes, but you kept it down. Others turn to God, or blame the Jews, or accuse old women of hexing the fields. Hunger twists the mind, turns neighbor against neighbor, turns prayer into accusation. You keep your head down and your prayers quiet. Food, or the lack of it, can tear a village apart. But the church offers more than just blame. It offers rituals, sacred feasts, symbolic meals. You attend Mass and watch the priest raise the host white, round, perfect. It's the body of Christ, they say. You're allowed a taste if you've confessed. You kneel tongue out and let the wafer dissolve. It's the softest bread you've ever eaten. You walk home with the flavor still lingering, pretending it was more than a crumb. Pretending it could carry you until dinner. Dinner, of course, is more pottage. You try not to sigh. The children are already asleep, curled like question marks around empty bowls. You dip your crust break off a piece and chew without tasting. You imagine rosemary. You imagine cheese. You imagine anything else. But this is the food you know. It fills the same hole every night. Sometimes you think about what you'd eat if you could have anything. A pie with sugared plums. A whole roast chicken steaming and golden. A pear. You've never had a pear. You don't even know if you'd like it. You go to sleep with the thought of a pear in your head and your stomach still aching. Tomorrow you'll rise and do it all again. Forage, stretch, chew, endure. Because in the Middle Ages, cuisine wasn't food. It was struggle. It was punishment. And you are still hungry. The rooster crows again, but it feels like you only just shut your eyes. The hearth has gone cold. You rub your arms beneath your coarse linen tunic, already dreading the bite of the air outside. Your stomach growls, not out of habit, but true need. The kind of hunger that sits low and angry in your gut, whispering reminders with every movement. You feel it behind your ribs and in your temples, where your thoughts come slower than usual. You need to eat. But again, the same question, eat what? There's a small heel of bread left. You saved it from yesterday's supper. It's hard as a rock now, so you dip it in ale to soften it. The ale is sour and cloudy, but it's safer than water. You chew slowly, eyes closed, trying to stretch each bite. Your jaw aches. The bread has tiny black specks in it. You don't look too closely. It's better not to know. Outside, the sun is low and the fields are still. You head toward the grain shed. Rats have gotten in again, chewing holes through the sacks. You can see their droppings. There's no way to clean it all. You push the spoiled grain to one side and scoop what you think looks clean enough. The truth is, if you threw away everything questionable, you'd throw away everything. So you take what you have and grind it. The millstone turns slowly. You've paid the miller with a sack of carrots this week, and he grumbles about the price of firewood, about the taxes, about the Lord's Son, who eats 3 loaves a day and does nothing. You nod, but say little. Everyone complains. No one changes anything. Back at home, you mix the flour with water and a bit of salt, precious salt. There's no yeast, no oven. You pat the dough flat and lay it on a hot stone near the hearth, turning it when the edges curl. It chars quickly and smoke fills the cottage. You wave it away and open the door. The wind carries it across the lane where a neighbor boy smells it and lingers. You break the flatbread in 2 and give him half. His eyes light up. It's a quiet exchange, wordless, but it means something. Here, food is a language all its own. You remember being hungry as a child, watching adults eat, with the weary efficiency of those who cannot afford to taste. The boy runs off and you settle down with your half. It's hot and crisp, and for a moment you can pretend it's something finer. Pretend it's a meat pie from the city filled with onions and spices. But the moment passes quickly, and the charred taste reminds you what it truly is, just flour and desperation. There are rumors of a peddler in the next village selling dried apples. You walk there after your morning chores, hoping it's true. The road is long and muddy. Your feet sink into the muck with every step. Along the way, you pass others travelers, beggars, a monk with a weathered face and a flask of sour wine. Everyone is looking for something to fill them. When you reach the market, the peddler is packing up. He has only one pouch of dried fruit left. You offer him 2 eggs and a turnip. He laughs, but accepts. You open the pouch, inhale the smell, and almost cry. It's sweet. Sweetness is a memory in your mouth. You eat 1 piece and pocket the rest. You'll make it last. You stop by a baker's stall just to look. He has loaves with poppy seeds, twisted buns with honey brushed across the tops. The smell is unbearable. You know these are not for you. They're for merchants and minor nobles, for priests with good connections. You ask for a crust. Just a crust. He scowls but throws you an old one. You nod, thank him, and walk away. That night you soak the crust in warm water, add a few nettles and mash in a bit of onion. It becomes a stew of sorts. Thin and gray, but it smells of bread. Your children eat in silence, chewing carefully. You give them more than your share. Hunger does strange things, but it can also carve out fierce love. And yet, for all this monotony, there's complexity in the rules. Feasts, fasts, and calendars that govern what you can eat and when. Wednesdays and Fridays are meatless. So are Ember Days, Saints' Days, the long stretch of Lent. You don't fully understand why. You just know when the bells ring, your bowl gets lighter. In wealthier homes, these fasting rules are opportunities for culinary games. Eel molded into the shape of lamb. Butter disguised as fish. Fish served with gold leaf and sugared ginger. It's absurd. They pretend not to eat meat by making everything look and taste like meat. But no one stops them. They're too powerful, and you eat turnips and pretend it's soup. You sometimes dream of fish roasted trout with herbs, a fat herring glazed with mustard seed. In reality, if you're lucky, you get dried cod, salted until it turns to leather. You have to soak it for hours to make it chewable, and even then it tastes like rope. But it fills your belly, and that's all that matters. You recall the time the monastery held a feast for St. Michael. You were brought to help clean. They served roasted goose with figs, thick slices of cheese, bowls of curd sweetened with honey. You licked a bowl clean before the abbot saw you. He scolded you, but you'd do it again. The taste of that curd still lives in your dreams. It was so soft, so gentle on the tongue, like mercy. But those days are rare. Tonight's meal is boiled barley with a single garlic clove. You found the garlic in the garden, hidden beneath weeds. You treasure it like gold. As it simmers, the scent rises and fills the room. For a fleeting moment, it smells like hope. You serve the bowls with care. The children sniff, smile faintly. Garlic. An extravagance. They eat slowly, savoring it. You lean back and close your eyes. It's not much, but it's something. Because sometimes the punishment of food is its absence. But sometimes, just sometimes, a clove of garlic can make you believe in magic again. You go to bed thinking of garlic and of the monastery's curd and of pears you've never tasted. And your stomach for tonight at least is quiet. Morning again. The same aching hunger, the same brittle chill creeping through the cottage stones. You sit up and wrap your woolen shawl tighter around your shoulders. There's a thin film of frost on the windowsill. Your breath clouds in the air. Your joints feel stiff, not just from the cold, but from months of poor nourishment. You move slower now. Everyone does when food becomes memory instead of certainty. Today is market day, and that means a chance slim, though it is, of something different, something rare. Not a feast, no, but maybe a barter. Maybe a crust that isn't riddled with mold. Maybe a stolen moment of taste that doesn't feel like punishment. You gather your few offerings, a spool of thread, a bundle of herbs, and 2 eggs you prayed the hens would lay in time. The market is bustling by the time you arrive. There's shouting, bargaining smoke from cookpots. Boiled onions, cabbage, offal stewing in vats of brown water. Nothing is clean. But everything smells of life of hunger met for now. You pass a man selling pies. Meat pies, he says, though the smell tells you it's more likely turnip and lard. Still, they're hot. The crust is golden and crackling. Your mouth waters against your will. You ask how much. He looks you over, then shakes his head. Not for thread, he mutters. You walk on. At another stall, a woman is grinding spices. She's dressed too finely for the village, a merchant's wife, maybe. The scents are intoxicating cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg. All impossibly expensive, imported, priceless. She lets a small pinch of ground cinnamon fall into your palm. Just a whisper of it. You bring it to your nose. The warmth is immediate, the scent almost divine. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you are somewhere else, somewhere warmer, richer, safer. But it passes. It always passes. You trade the eggs for a slice of blood sausage. It's dense, dark, speckled with oats, rich in the way that poor food tries to be. You tuck it into your satchel like treasure. Tonight will be different. Tonight there will be protein. On your way home you pass the local alehouse. Not grand, just a timber frame and a smoky fire pit. Inside a man sings drunkenly, while others chew on roasted barley cakes and drink thick ale. You duck your head in half to warm your hands, half to listen. Someone's boiling pig trotters. The smell is heavy, gelatinous. You stay only a moment, then slip out. You can't afford to linger where food becomes temptation. Back home, you slice the blood sausage thin. You lay it gently in the iron pot, then add the last of the barley, a chopped onion, and a bit of lard scraped from the side of the cask. The fire hisses. The scent fills your cottage. It smells like celebration. You call the children, and they gather fast. You watch them eat first, always them first. Their hands shake as they lift the bowls, their spoons scraping greedily. When you finally eat, you take slow, measured bites. The sausage is salty, rich with iron. The oats give it bulk, the lard gives it weight. It's not a feast, but it pretends to be. After dinner, you sit by the fire with your hands resting on your stomach. There's a small, rare feeling of satisfaction, a quiet in your gut. You think about how many meals are built not from abundance but illusion. How often you've relied on trickery to get through the worst days. There's the trick of roasting stale bread to make it seem fresh. The trick of steeping old onion skins to color broth. The trick of mixing water and ashes to simulate salt when yours runs out. The trick of adding pebbles to boiling pots to mimic meat by sound alone. None of it tastes good, but it plays on the imagination. and imagination in this life is survival. Then there's the church again. You remember the feast of Corpus Christi. There was a procession through the village, all robes and incense and sacred bread. They gave the poor bowls of pottage with a single strip of beef. You stood in line, took your portion, and ate slowly in the churchyard. It was the only time that year you had meat twice in 1 week. And yet even that kindness came with rules. You couldn't eat if you hadn't confessed. You couldn't approach the sacred meal with sin on your heart. Food and guilt walked hand in hand, tangled tightly together. To eat well was to risk pride. To crave too much was gluttony. And so even when your belly was full, your spirit often trembled. You think of the nobles again, how they used food as spectacle. Peacocks served whole feathers reattached after roasting. Pies filled with live birds that burst out when cut open. Jellied fish shaped like flowers. Marzipan molded into castles. It's theater. Power made edible. A fantasy you'll never touch. But food isn't always a celebration. Sometimes it's used for shame. You've heard of women accused of adultery being denied bread in their punishment. Of beggars forced to eat garbage in public. Of prisoners fed on nothing but boiled weeds until they confessed. Hunger is power, and those who control the food control everything. And so you return to your humble stores, onions, dried peas, a few carrots buried in straw for preservation. The carrots are spindly now, pale and wrinkled, but they're something. You slice them thin and dry them near the hearth to make them last. You think about making vinegar soaking apple scraps in water with a bit of sugar. It'll take weeks, but maybe it'll add bite to the bland stew. A little alchemy in a world of rot. Tomorrow you'll gather mushrooms carefully. You've learned which are edible, which ones make you sick, and which ones never let you wake up again. You know not to trust the red ones or those with white gills. You always test a new one on your lips before swallowing. You've seen what happens to those who don't. But even poison tempts when hunger rules. Night falls. The fire crackles low. You sit beside it and sip the last of the broth from tonight's pot. It's thin but warm. You savor the heat as much as the taste. You lie down on your straw bed, the scent of smoke in your hair, the echo of sausage still on your tongue. Your stomach is quiet again, not full but not empty. You whisper a prayer, not for wealth or feasts or meat-filled pies, just for something to eat tomorrow and the strength to chew it. You drift to sleep with dreams of spices, not just cinnamon now, but cumin, cardamom, black pepper, exotic names that taste like magic. And in your sleep, you taste a world you'll never live in, a world where cuisine isn't punishment, but joy, where hunger is a stranger, where food is love. You awaken before the sun, not from noise or duty, but from your stomach, twisting slowly like a fist. The warmth of last night's broth is long gone, and you feel the cold emptiness again. It's always there like a second soul, one that groans louder than your thoughts. You press your hands against your belly and listen to the wind outside. It whistles low and sharp through the thatch like a warning. Today you'll do something you rarely do. You'll try to beg. Not out of laziness, not out of shameful want, but because your food stores are down to nothing but pebbly flour and a few bruised turnips. The chickens have stopped laying. Your last carrot shriveled into leather. You've stretched and soaked and scraped and boiled until there's nothing left to stretch. You set out toward the manor. It's an act of risk. Begging must be done carefully, humbly. Not too bold, not too proud. You approach the kitchen door, eyes lowered, and wait until the cook sees you. She's busy turning a spit, and the scent of roasting meat pours out thick, rich, heavy with fat and pepper. Your knees go weak. She gives you a long, slow glance, then tosses you a lump wrapped in cloth. Trenchers, she says. Used ones. You nod gratefully, though you know what that means. They're not meant to be food. They're soaked with grease, stained with stew, gnawed at the corners by others. But to you, they are a miracle. You carry them home with reverence, unwrap them on your wooden table. The smell of meat still clings faintly to them old gravy onion, maybe a bit of goose fat. You chew carefully, ignoring the stiffness, the odd taste, the texture like rope. You close your eyes and pretend it's roast beef. Pretend it's yours. The children eat quickly, not even asking where the food came from. They've learned not to question blessings. You remember once hearing a friar say that heaven is a banquet, endless and generous. You hope it's true, because on earth food is doled out in crumbs and cruelty. Later you step into the fields carrying a small sack and a dull knife. You're not harvesting crops, you're searching for roots. Wild parsnips, maybe. Burdock. Anything. You pull at tufts of grass and dig beneath hedges. Your fingers are numb, but the hunger drives you. You find a small patch of wild garlic. Its scent rises like music. You gather the bulbs carefully, not taking too much. You've learned not to strip the land bare. Leave some behind. Always. As you walk back, you pass the local tanner's boy. He's chewing something. You ask what it is. He shrugs. Boiled hoof, he says. We had trimmings. You nod. You've done the same. It's gelatinous, flavorless, hard to digest. But if boiled long enough, even bones can become broth. The rich eat flesh. The poor make do with what's left. Back home, you boil the garlic bulbs with the last of your flour, stirring constantly to keep it from sticking. It forms a paste more glue than gruel. You spread it on a trencher, warm it over the fire, and serve it to the children. They chew in silence, faces blank, eyes tired. You eat last as always. The paste clings to your tongue. It's bitter but warm. It's something. You think again of those who don't eat at all, those who've already succumbed. You remember your cousin who died last spring. A bad fever. But truly, it was hunger. His body too weak to fight it off. He hadn't eaten in days. His mother wept not just from grief, but from guilt. She'd fed the younger child that last crust. What choice did she have? And it's not just illness or famine that starves people, it's the system. The tithe, the tax, the tolls. You give a tenth to the church, a portion to the Lord, another to the miller, and by the time you sit down to eat, your hands are empty. The bread they eat in castles is the bread your work helped bake. You knead the dough, you till the soil, you reap the grain, but you chew the husks, and still the church tells you be grateful. Fasting is holy. Hunger purifies the soul. Gluttony is a sin, remember. But no one accuses the bishop of gluttony when his table overflows. No one scolds the baron's children as they smear jam on fresh cheese. You remember once helping at the monastery kitchen. They made almond milk. You'd never even heard of such a thing. Almonds imported expensive ground into a creamy liquid and strained through linen. You were allowed to taste a spoonful. It was soft, fragrant like nothing you'd known. You still remember that spoon, that one moment of luxury. Now your version of almond milk is soaking crushed barley in warm water and calling it broth. You once overheard a priest say that food is divine, that every meal is a gift from God. You wonder if he's ever eaten pottage for 40 days straight. You wonder if he's ever gnawed on boiled bark or wept while digging for roots with frozen fingers. But then again, maybe he has. Some of the priests remember hunger. Some are kind. You recall Father Jerome, who once slipped you a honeyed fig. Just one. He said every soul deserves sweetness. You almost cried. That fig changed your entire week. You savored it bite by bite, letting the sugar coat your tongue like grace. You look now at your stores. A single onion, half a trencher, a cup of barley. You sigh. It's enough for one more pot. You start the fire again and scrape the ashes aside to set the pot low. You add water salt, a pinch of herbs from the window ledge. The scent rises slowly. It's not much, but it's warm. You feed the children and save your own bowl for last. As you eat, you chew slowly, carefully, methodically. Every bite is counted not in numbers, but in seconds of life extended. And when it's gone, you rinse the pot with water and sip that too. You curl up by the fire stomach, quiet thoughts soft. You think of that honeyed fig. You think of almond milk. You think of trenchers soaked in stew of roots pulled from the ground, of broth thickened with bark and prayer. You think of food as punishment, yes, but also sometimes as survival. And you know in your bones that tomorrow the hunger will wake you again. But for now you sleep. You dream of sweetness. You dream of more. The sky outside is still the color of cold iron when you wake, but there's already movement in the village. The soft bleating of goats, the rhythmic thud of axes splitting firewood, and somewhere a child coughing. You sit up slowly. The straw in your bedding crackles, and your spine feels like it's been packed with stones. The fire has died. You can see your breath. You reach for the pot near the hearth, the one with last night's scrapings, and tilt it. A few thick drops of congealed broth slide down the side. You swipe them up with your finger and taste. Cold, flat, but salty. Your stomach grumbles in response. You smile bitterly. Even the memory of food is enough to start it growling. There's no meal waiting. Not this morning. You knew that before you opened your eyes. The larder is bare, the turnip bin empty, and the flour sack dusted with just enough to mock you. So you do what you always do. You tighten your belt, drink a cup of warm ale to trick your belly into calm and carry on. Today, the manor's steward is handing out alms. It happens once every few months, usually when the Lord wants to be seen as merciful, or when there's a surplus of something unfit for his table. You walk up the long path to the storehouse, joining a line of hunched figures, mothers, widows, old men who should be resting. Everyone here shares the same look, quiet desperation, dressed in worn wool. When it's your turn, the steward doesn't look up. He just hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle and moves on. Inside is a piece of dried bread, an onion, and a hunk of fat. You nod your thanks, though he doesn't notice. Back home, you unwrap the food like it's a gift from heaven. The bread is dry but not moldy, miracle number 1. The onion is bruised but firm, miracle number 2. The fat. Now that is gold. You'll render it and use it to flavor at least 3 pots of soup. Maybe even fry some flatbread if you can find any flour. You chop the onion, melt the fat, and let them simmer together. The scent rises immediately, rich, savory, comforting. The children stir from their sleep, drawn by the promise of something warm. You break the bread into the pot, letting it soak and soften. A thick porridge forms. You ladle it into bowls, garnishing with a single wilted herb leaf for each. It's not pretty, but it's hearty, and it tastes like hope. After the meal, you sit on the stool by the fire and stare into the embers. The children are laughing faintly. Not loud, not often, but enough to remind you that the body isn't the only thing food can feed. You remember being told once that food was sacred, not just the ritual host, but every crust and crumb. A monk had said that to waste food was to insult the God who gave it. And yet so much is wasted by those who have too much. You've seen pigs fed fresher scraps than you've eaten in months. There's a tale passed around the village about a feast in the Lord's hall, where they served a pie filled with blackbirds. Real ones. They burst out when the crust was cut, flapping around the room, while nobles laughed and clapped. You wonder what happened to the birds afterward. Were they caught and roasted or tossed out like the bread trenchers? You've eaten pigeon, not roast, but boiled. Caught it yourself with a crude snare. Scrawny, tough, more bone than meat. But it felt like victory. You plucked the feathers, boiled it with barley, and shared it proudly. The bones are still tucked away under the hearthstone like trophies. There are other victories, too. Times when you managed to trade needlework for eggs, or when a neighbor shared a jar of pickled cabbage. You remember the way that cabbage crackled between your teeth, sharp, sour, unforgettable. You hadn't tasted vinegar in years. And then there are the defeats. The famine 3 years ago when rain didn't come and the crops curled up like dead spiders. When people ate rats, clay, even each other. A woman in the next hamlet lost all 3 children. She walked into the woods one night and never came back. The priest said she was taken by despair. Others said starvation. You think they were the same thing. After the famine came a plague, and after the plague a bad winter. It never ends. Hunger is a wheel turning slowly, crushing you bit by bit. But still there are good days. Like today. You wrap the remaining fat in cloth and hide it high on the shelf behind the old candlestick. It's treasure. With it, you can turn tasteless root soup into something worth remembering. You step outside and breathe the cold air. The sun is trying to shine through the mist. There's a hint of warmth in it, like a promise. You head to the herb garden. Not much survives in winter, but the rosemary is still green. You pinch off a sprig. That's enough to elevate tonight's meal from edible to extraordinary. You stop by the neighbor's cottage. Old Maud sits outside, wrapped in layers, eyes closed to the weak sun. You give her half your bread. She opens one eye and smiles. "You'll make a saint yet," she croaks. You shake your head. "Just hungry." She laughs. It's a dry sound, but kind. Later, you boil lentils with the rosemary and a pinch of ashes. Yes, ashes from the hearth. It's an old trick. They add a slight bitterness like mustard greens. And when you mash everything together with a bit of fat, it tastes almost intentional. You light a candle for supper, not for luxury, but because the light makes the food look richer. Shadows hide the thinness of the portions. The children eat slowly. You've taught them how. If you eat slowly enough, the stomach believes there's more. Afterward, you sit with your bowl in your lap, scraping the edges with a spoon made from antler. You feel the warmth settle in your bones. just a little. Just enough. Tonight you'll sleep better. Not because you're full, never that, but because for one day you had enough. And that in this world is something close to grace. It rains all night. Not the soft, gentle kind, but the angry, cold kind. The kind that turns roads into rivers and roofs into drums. Your sleep is fitful, disturbed by the steady drip of water leaking from the thatch above your head. By morning, the floor is damp, the hearth cold, and your body feels like it's been soaked in stone. You check the corner where you hid the fat. It's still there, still wrapped, still safe. That little treasure has become your anchor, a symbol of control in a life where most things weather work. Sickness lords are not yours to command. Breakfast is a question mark. There's no bread left, no porridge, not even a hard crust. So you pour a cup of ale, weak and cloudy, and sip it slowly to quiet your stomach. Your children stir. They ask nothing. They've learned to wait, to watch your face before they speak. Hunger has taught them patience, though they're too young to call it that. You decide to fast today, not because it's a holy day, not because you're penitent, but because there simply isn't enough. You'll eat later after they've had their fill, if anything is left. It's not selflessness, it's calculation. If they're stronger, they can work. If they can work, they can bring food. You send your eldest to fish. The stream isn't far, but the rains have made it wild and cruel. Still, with a bent nail and some twine, there's always a chance. Even the smallest fish is a miracle. You pack him a bit of the rendered fat wrapped in leaves. It will coat the hook. He nods solemn and proud and disappears into the mist. The younger ones stay with you. You send them to pick dandelion greens and sorrel anything sharp and edible. They've become expert foragers. Children in this world grow up with eyes to the ground, hands always reaching for something that might fill a bowl. While they're gone, you grind the last handful of rye into meal. It's coarse, full of grit and husk, but it will thicken water into soup. You scrape the hearth for old ashes to add, remembering the way they deepen flavor. You drop in a few dried herbs. It will be thin, but it will be something. The children return with their hannas full of damp leaves and a single mushroom. You inspect it closely, your heart caught in your throat. One wrong mushroom and the meal becomes a funeral. But this one you recognize. A dryad saddle, chewy, woody, but safe. You thank them, kiss their foreheads, and chop it into the pot. Midday comes. No sign of the boy at the stream. You stir the soup slowly. The steam is fragrant with greens and smoke. You break the silence with a song, an old one about saints and sparrows and spring. Your voice is low, but the children join in. Music distracts. Music fills space where food cannot. When the boy returns, he is soaked to the bone. He is also smiling. In his hands, a trout small, battered, half-scaled by the current, but still whole. You praise him like a knight returning from war. You clean the fish carefully, saving the bones, the head, the skin. Nothing is wasted. Everything will be used. You roast the fish over the fire and flake the meat into the soup, saving a small fillet for the boy. The pot now smells like wealth, like something out of a manor kitchen. Even the neighbors peek their heads in, catching the scent. You share a cup of broth with the widow next door. She blesses you between sips. At supper, you divide the fish evenly. Each child gets a piece small but real. You watch them eat and feel something warm settle into your chest. Not pride, not relief, something quieter. A sense that just for now, the wheel of hunger has paused. You eat last. Your portion is broth-heavy, but you savor it. You chew, slowly close your eyes. The taste of trout, faint though it is, lingers on your tongue like memory. You imagine it roasted in butter. You imagine butter. It's been months. You remember once, when you were small, your mother made butter from cream skimmed off milk. She shook it in a goatskin pouch for hours, her arms trembling. When it finally formed, she smeared it on warm bread. The memory haunts you. It feels like a story from another life. The soup is gone quickly. You scrape the pot and sip the water you used to rinse it just to hold on to the flavor. The children fall asleep fast, bellies quiet for once. You sit beside the hearth, watching the fire dim, and think of the stream, of the boy proud and wet holding his prize. Food here is more than sustenance. It's story, victory, ritual, even punishment. But tonight it was reward. You remember a traveler once said that in the East salt is sacred, that people carry it in pouches, offer it in friendship, guard it like silver. You understand that now. Salt is power. Salt is life. You tuck a pinch away for tomorrow. And as the night settles in, as your stomach hums instead of howls, you find a strange sensation rising in you. You're not full, but you are content. It's morning again, and today brings a rare surprise sunshine. Weak and pale, yes, but it's there, spreading gold across the muddy lane and casting long shadows from the crooked fence posts. You squint into the light as you stretch your back, aching from sleep on the straw mat, but somehow comforted by the warmth touching your cheeks. You rise and stir the fire back to life, adding a few sticks you gathered yesterday. The hearth glows, and already the children are beginning to stir. You check your stores. There's still a sliver of the rendered fat left wrapped in a cloth, now stained through. You slice off a thin ribbon and drop it into the iron pot with water barley meal and a pinch of crushed garlic from your windowsill jar. A broth forms faint but nourishing. As the scent spreads, you remember what day it is market fair. Not just market, but fair, the one day every few months, when vendors from neighboring villages come to trade. Not just essentials, but luxuries. Cloth from the city, ribbons from France, dried oranges, and on rare occasions, cheese, real cheese, sharp, hard, aromatic. You dress the children in their least torn tunics, comb their hair with your fingers, and tuck what few goods you have into your satchel. A spool of dyed thread, 2 carved buttons, and a bit of dried rosemary. Not much, but fairs trade on novelty. If someone wants buttons, you might return home with something rare, maybe an egg, maybe a sliver of honeycomb. The fair is already bustling when you arrive. Smoke from roasting meat mingles with the aroma of cider sweet and tart. Your stomach turns over at the smell of pies, apple, and pork, thick crusts browned and flaking at the edges. It's torture, but you've learned to handle torture with a straight face. A crowd forms around the pastry vendor. You watch from a distance, chewing your lip. The pies are far beyond your means, but the man notices your children staring. He hands over a crust, broken and cooling. You nod your thanks as your youngest clutches it like a relic. They share it crumb by crumb. At a spice table, you ask to smell the pepper. The merchant lets you, though he keeps the tin well out of reach. The scent fills your head like thunder. It's sharp, citrusy, almost hot. You ask how much, and he tells you the price too high as expected, but you thank him. The memory of the smell will last longer than the pepper would. Further on, you find a cheese seller, an old woman hunched with cracked hands and sharp eyes. Her rounds are stacked like golden wheels. You show her your goods. She picks up the buttons, turns them over. "Ox bone," she asks. You nod. She studies you, then breaks off a sliver of cheese, crumbly firm, flecked with herbs. "For the thread," she says. You accept the trade without blinking. This is a miracle. You don't eat it there. You wrap it tightly in cloth and tuck it deep into your satchel. This is not food to be eaten in haste. This is food to be remembered. Back home, the children are buzzing. You carve the cheese into 5 slivers, one for each child, one for you. You let the flavor sit on your tongue, salty, tangy, rich. It makes your eyes sting. You don't cry, but you could. That night you prepare a porridge with barley and nettle, and into it you crumble the last piece of cheese. The whole pot now carries the flavor. Even the scent of it makes the cottage feel warmer, like you've lit a second fire. This isn't just food. This is meaning. In a world where meals are monotony, anything different becomes sacred. A clove of garlic, a bit of pork fat, a cracked crust from a stranger's pie, and now cheese. You've created a feast from it. As you eat, you think about the way the rich consume food. Not just what they eat, but how. Surrounded by servants, seated on high-backed chairs far from the fire. They don't eat alone yet, somehow they never share. They eat to show status. You eat to survive. Sometimes you think they forget food even has taste. You've heard that some nobles don't even finish their plates, that they discard what's left or worse, feed it to dogs. Once a visiting merchant said a baron he served ate roasted goose stuffed with grapes and almonds and threw half of it away. Threw it away. You think about the stew you made last week from turnip peels, garlic scraps, and old trenchers soaked in broth. You ate every drop, nothing wasted, every bite accounted for. And yet the church still preaches that gluttony is a sin. Gluttony, you think, must be a luxury. It must be something you can only afford when your cupboards are never bare. After dinner, you sit outside as the children sleep. The stars are out tonight, clear cold and watchful. You hum a lullaby your mother used to sing, something about feast days and spring rains. She used to sing it when she baked. Her bread was coarse but warm. You remember the sound of her kneading rhythmic, strong, a kind of music. You haven't made real bread in weeks. You have no yeast, no wheat flour, just the scraps you scrape together for flat cakes and porridge. But maybe, just maybe, you'll trade for flour next fair. Maybe the miller will want rosemary again. As the night deepens, your stomach feels settled. Not full, but still. The cheese worked its magic. You feel almost human again. You head inside, pull the blanket tighter over the children, and tuck yourself close to the fire. There's no meat, no wine, no tablecloth. But tonight you've tasted something special. You've turned the day into something more than survival. And in this world, that's all a person can ask for. Not fullness, but dignity. The first frost came last night. You see it silvering the edges of the thatch, glittering on the weeds by the well. Your breath clouds in front of your face and the chill settles deep into your bones. It's not winter yet, not truly, but the cold has arrived, and it never travels alone. It brings hunger. It brings scarcity. It brings weeks of meals that shrink as the days shorten. You pull your shawl tighter and check your stores. The barley jar is low. The last carrot has gone soft in the center. The root cellar smells damp and tired. There are a few turnips still hard and dense, some dried beans, a small sack of rye flour. Enough maybe for 5 days if you stretch it, if you go without. You skip breakfast. Instead, you begin preparing the fire. There's a rhythm to it now. Stack the sticks, twist the straw, blow gently until the spark catches. The flame flares up like it knows its purpose. You add water to the pot and throw in a handful of beans. They'll need hours to soften. You plan the rest of the day around them. That's how it works now, life arranged around cooking times, fuel rations, and stomachs waiting to be filled. The children help with chores. The youngest gathers twigs. The eldest checks traps near the stream. You all know your roles. Everyone works. Everyone hungers. Everyone hopes. You go foraging again. Not for novelty this time, but necessity. You dig near the hedgerows and find 2 handfuls of wild onions. Their smell is sharp, almost too strong in the cold air. You carry them like treasure. Later, you'll fry them in the last drop of fat to flavor the beans. A banquet by your standards. On your way back, you stop by Old Maud's cottage. She's ill, hasn't been outside in days. You knock gently and call her name. No answer. The door creaks open with a push. Inside, it smells of mold and ashes. She's wrapped in blankets, her face pale. You kneel beside her and touch her forehead. Warm. Too warm. Fever. She mutters something about broth. You nod, even though you know you don't have enough to share. But you promise. Because that's what people do here when food is punishment and kindness is a form of rebellion. Back home, you pour off some of the bean water and add more salt than usual. You bring it to her in a wooden cup, steaming and thin. She drinks it without opening her eyes, then whispers, "Bless you." And even though it was mostly water, mostly nothing, she says it like you gave her the world. Back at your cottage, the beans are soft. You mash them with the wild onions and a pinch of rosemary. It smells like food, real food. The children gather around. You serve each one a small bowl. They eat in silence, hunched over the steam, cradling the warmth in their fingers. You save your own portion for later. You always do. After dinner, you tend the fire. The light flickers across the walls, catching on every crack and rough board. The smell of onions still lingers in the air. You think about the way food used to be described to you in stories, banquets and feasts, tables heavy with roasted meat, flagons of wine, fruits spilling from baskets. You used to believe it. Used to think you might see it one day. But the older you got, the clearer it became those stories weren't meant for you. You remember a passing friar once saying that in heaven, we'll all dine together, kings and beggars alike, that God would feed every soul. You try to imagine what that would look like. Would it smell like onions and beans, or like sugar and spice? You've never tasted sugar, not truly. Once years ago, a merchant passing through the village gave your mother a sliver of candied lemon peel. She broke it into 5 pieces. You still remember the taste. It stung your tongue like light. It melted like joy. You've never had anything like it since. Your children ask about honey. They've heard of it but never tasted it. You try to describe it thick, golden sweet as summer air, but the words fall short. How do you describe pleasure to someone who's only known survival? That night you check your stores again. The flour is almost gone. You mix the last bit with water and ashes and flatten it into cakes. They cook quickly on the stone. Crisp at the edges, soft in the middle. They taste like smoke and effort. You set two aside for tomorrow. You don't know what else breakfast will be, but it will begin with those. You tuck the children into bed. Their cheeks are pink from the fire, their bellies not full, but not empty either. They sleep without complaint. They've learned that sleep is the only time hunger doesn't follow. You sit by the embers, chewing the last bit of bean mash. The flavor is better than it should be. The onions really made a difference. You close your eyes and hold the taste on your tongue, trying to memorize it. Because in a few days, there will be no more onions, no more beans, no more anything unless you trade or beg or find something wild. But tonight, you tasted real food. Cooked slowly, flavored, intentionally served with care. And in this world, this cold, punishing world that is everything. The sky is white this morning, not with snow, but with the weight of it. Heavy clouds hang low, thick, and unmoving, as if waiting for the right moment to release their burden. You step outside and feel the cold settle into your lungs. It's not winter yet, not quite, but the world is preparing. And so are you. You pull your shawl tighter and walk to the storehouse. There's little left. A few dried beans, the flat cakes you saved from last night, and a handful of oats. It's not enough. Not with the cold creeping in. Not with mouths to feed and weeks still to go before the Christmas feast, when the church sometimes distributes meat to the poorest. You heat water and crumble one oat cake into it, letting it soften into mush. You sprinkle in salt and pretend it's stew. The children eat first, slurping quietly, heads bowed like monks in prayer. You save the last ladleful for yourself. It tastes like memory, like the ghost of meals past. After breakfast, you begin your rounds. First to the woods. You bring your basket and your small knife, stepping carefully through the frost-stiff underbrush. You know where the hazelnut trees grow, but this late in the season, most have been taken by animals or other foragers. Still, you search. You always search. You find a few mushrooms, not many and not the best kind. Slippery damp, they'll need boiling. But they're edible. You find a single apple, too fallen and bruised half-rotten on one side. You slice away the worst, tuck the rest in your basket like a treasure. On the way home, you pass a fellow villager, Thomas the Weaver. He's thin, pale, his fingers cracked from work and cold. You offer him one of the mushrooms. He nods gratefully. I traded my thread for flour, he says. But no firewood. No way to cook it. You both stand in silence, understanding without needing words. Hunger is not just empty bowls, it's empty futures. You invite him to use your fire that evening. He agrees with a nod. Tonight, the cottage will be warmer with company, and the pot fuller with his flour. A shared meal, however humble, feels almost holy. Back home, you start the fire again. You boil the mushrooms and toss in the diced apple for sweetness. The smell is strange, earthy, and sour. But it's a smell, a sign of food becoming something more than parts. The children watch the pot, eyes wide. Will there be more? One whispers. You smile without answering. You don't know yet. While it simmers, you think back to a story you once heard about a noble's table where every guest was served 6 courses. Meats spiced with cinnamon and cloves, custards dusted with sugar, cheeses molded into animal shapes. There was even something called blancmange chicken stewed in milk, thickened with rice, perfumed with rosewater. You try to imagine it. The scent, the warmth, the texture. But it's like trying to recall a dream you never had. Still, you recreate your own version mushroom stew with apple served in wooden bowls, eaten with wooden spoons, shared between friends. No spice, no sugar, but it's hot and shared, and that makes it better than most. Thomas arrives at dusk, bringing his flour in a pouch. It's gritty dark, but serviceable. You mix it with water, form small flat rounds, and bake them on the stone. The children watch the cakes rise with glee. You offer the first one to Thomas. He tears off a piece and murmurs, "Better than anything I've tasted in weeks." You laugh softly. You must have low standards. "I do," he says, "but this is still better. You all eat together." The stew is strange but satisfying. The bread is chewy and warm. For a while, no one speaks. The fire crackles, the bowls empty. The silence deepens into something safe. After the meal, Thomas stays by the hearth while the children drift off. You speak in hushed tones about weather, about rationing, about the way hunger has become a neighbor that never leaves. He tells you he once saw a noble throw an entire loaf of bread into the fire just to watch it burn. "Said it was stale," he mutters. "Stale." He shakes his head. You both fall silent again. You offer him a blanket for the night. He sleeps near the hearth, and as you lie down on your straw mat, you think of the stew you made from mushrooms and a bruised apple and how it warmed more than just your body. You think about how food has become not just punishment, but proof of worth. If you're rich, it's proof of power. If you're poor, it's proof you exist at all. You whisper a prayer not for abundance, but for just enough. Enough to make tomorrow's meal. Enough to share if you must. Enough to be warm. And in the dark, as your stomach settles with something solid, you feel a rare flicker of peace. Tomorrow you'll go back to the woods. Tomorrow you'll scrape and stretch again. But tonight you've eaten, and that here is everything. You awaken to the scent of damp wood smoke and the soft stirrings of someone already up and moving. Thomas must be stoking the fire. He's careful not to wake the children. The embers pulse with soft red light, and your body aches less this morning. Maybe it's the full stomach from last night. Maybe it's the comfort of shared silence. The children are still curled together warm under their threadbare blankets. Their faces look peaceful but thin. Hunger never leaves completely. It just quiets when fed. You sit up and join Thomas by the hearth. He hands you a cup of warm water. No herbs, no honey, but it feels kind. "I'll try the woods again," he says softly. "Maybe more roots, maybe nuts." You nod. You'll do the same. Today must be another search. It always is. Before he goes, you break one of the flatbreads in half and give him a piece. He hesitates, then accepts it. He tears it slowly, savors each bite like it's a gift. And it is. Once he's gone, you turn to the day's duties. You check the food stores. A few oats, some dried nettle, one small onion. You can work with that. You begin boiling water, planning a thin porridge for breakfast, one of those meals that pretends to be enough. As the children wake, you greet them with gentle voices and bowls in hand. They eat gratefully, knowing the routine. No one asks for more. There's never more. After breakfast, you send the eldest to gather kindling and the youngest to see if old Maud needs anything. You'll go to the village green where the manor sometimes leaves bones for the poor. Not meat, not cuts, bones. You hope. The sky is darker today, clouds heavy with the threat of snow. As you walk, you pass others with baskets and empty sacks. Everyone is looking for something, anything. At the green, the dogs have gotten there first. A few bones lie scattered near the refuse pile, gnawed but not clean. You pick through them, careful checking for splinters. One still has a bit of tendon on it. Another is thick enough to yield marrow if boiled long enough. You wrap them in cloth and head home. The walk back is slow, your feet heavy, your breath fogging the air. Your fingers sting from the cold. The cottage is a welcome sight, smoke curling from the chimney like a quiet promise. Back inside, you start the fire again, drop the bones into the pot, and cover them with water. They'll boil all day. The broth will be thin, but it will carry the flavor of meat. That's enough to stir the imagination. You add a pinch of salt and the last of the nettles. As it simmers, you press the bones, gently coaxing out anything they might give. The children return with twigs and smiles. They can smell the broth already. Meat, one asks. You shake your head, but you smile. Almost. And that's how it works. You make soup out of bones and call it stew. You flavor water and call it broth. You stretch truth like dough until it fills a bowl. The stew simmers until the light fades. You skim the fat, crush the marrow, and stir until the water thickens slightly. The onion goes in last, diced small. You want the flavor to survive the boil. At supper, you ladle out the results. The broth is warm, rich in scent, if not in substance. The children dip crusts of old bread into their bowls and sigh with delight. You've taught them well. After the meal, you sit by the hearth again. You think of the bones. You'll dry them, then crush them for dust. They can be added to bread later for texture and the faintest trace of nutrients. Nothing is wasted. You remember once watching the manor cook prepare a feast. She threw away more food in 1 hour than your family sees in a week. Discarded egg yolks, rinds of cheese, crusts of white bread. You'd stood at the back of the kitchen, sweeping ashes, your stomach turning with the scent of roasted meat and sweet pies. And you'd wondered how people could throw food away when others starve inches from their walls. The cook had caught you staring and tossed you a chicken neck. You'd thanked her like she'd handed you gold. You still remember the taste. Crisped skin salt, the tang of something real. You'd gnawed it clean and licked your fingers after. That was 5 years ago. 5 years. But you can still feel it. Food in your world is never just food. It's memory, emotion, proof of life. You remember each special bite the way others remember birthdays. And the rest, the daily gruel, the onion water, the boiled bark that becomes the background hum. Forgettable, functional, forgotten. But not tonight. Tonight's soup thin, though it was tasted of something real. The children sleep more soundly. You feel it in their breathing and the way their bodies have uncurled. You watch the fire burn low. The bones in the pot crackle as the water evaporates. You whisper a prayer, not loud, not elaborate. Just a word of thanks for warm broth, for soft sleep, for bones not yet picked clean. Tomorrow there may be less. Tomorrow the snow may come. But tonight you fed your children, and in this life that is a triumph. Snow, not a dusting, not a flutter this morning. The world is white. The village lane has vanished beneath it. The rooftops are powdered. The trees stand like frozen skeletons, and your breath escapes in clouds that disappear before your eyes. The snow arrived silently in the night, and now everything is muffled. Everything is still. Everything is colder. Inside your cottage, the fire is already struggling. You coax it back with careful breath, and twigs dried near the hearth. Your fingers are stiff. Your nose is red. The children are still curled beneath their blankets, but you can tell they're awake. Hunger always wakes them before light. You have no bread left, no flour, no grain. Just yesterday's boiled bones picked clean and drying near the fire. One is blackened at the end from too much simmering. The others are pale and hollow, like the ribs of an old shipwreck. You crush them gently with a stone. Bone dust. You mix it with a bit of water and ash. It will be something like a paste, or at least something that coats the mouth. It's not a meal, but it's not nothing. The children drink warm water and hold their cups like soup bowls, pretending. You don't stop them. Pretending helps. You know you can't forage today. The snow makes everything impossible. Roots are frozen in the ground. Mushrooms, buried greens turn to ice. Even the animals have disappeared. The birds have gone silent. The squirrels absent. You've seen winters like this before. You know what it means. It means the hunger will sharpen. You sit at the window and watch the path. There's no movement yet, but you wait. Because on days like this, someone always comes. Someone knocking someone in need, someone with a story to swap for a bowl of hot water or a corner near your fire. By midday, the knock comes. It's a stranger tall, wrapped in a thick, tattered cloak. His beard is heavy with ice. He asks only for shelter. You hesitate for a breath, but then step aside. Hunger may rule the land, but kindness still lives in its cracks. He sits near the fire and warms his hands. You hand him a cup of weak broth, nothing but bone dust and salt, but he drinks it like it's wine. You ask no questions. You just listen as he speaks. He tells you about a monastery to the north where the monks still keep livestock. He says they give out cheese to travelers hard-aged, wrapped in wax and cloth. He says the abbot believes in feeding the poor, that hunger is the devil's way of testing God's mercy. You've heard tales like this before. You want to believe them. You want to walk north tomorrow. But snow says no. Still, the idea of cheese makes your mouth water. Not soft cheese, not curds, just something aged sharp with bite. You can taste it in your mind. You share your story and return about the pottage you made with wild onions, the bone broth that kept the children warm, the mushrooms gathered with trembling hands. The stranger nods. He's lived the same tales. You share the last of the flatbread, hard cracked, nearly fossilized. You warm it over the coals until it softens just enough to bite. The children eat first, slowly, carefully, chewing each morsel as if it might vanish mid-bite. The stranger breaks off a small piece, thanks you, and chews it in silence. You think of the word hospitality. The priest once said it meant opening your home to Christ in disguise. You wonder if Christ would wear a frost-bitten beard and eat stale bread without complaint. You think maybe he would. That night, you boil water again and stir in ashes and the last of the marrow paste. You serve it in wooden bowls. The children are quieter tonight. Their faces tired, their eyes distant. You know that kind of hunger, it doesn't cry. It waits. It sinks into the body like snow into soil. The stranger offers a song. His voice is rough but deep. The words are unfamiliar, another dialect maybe, but the melody is soft, rising like smoke. The children close their eyes. You close yours too. The music covers the cottage like a second blanket. When the fire dies down, he sleeps near it wrapped in his cloak. You check on the children one more time, pull the wool tighter around their feet, and settle onto your straw mat. You stare at the ceiling where the thatch is rimed with frost. You whisper a wish, not even a prayer, just a breath for food, not a feast, not a banquet. Just food enough for one more day. You wonder if the monastery is real, if the cheese waits for you wrapped in wax, smelling of salt and salvation. If you could walk there through snow. But tonight you sleep. You let the ache in your stomach settle. You dream of hot cheese melting over fresh bread, of sweet pears soaked in honey, of fires that don't die and tables that don't empty. In the dream, you're not begging for scraps, you're serving them. And in the dream, no one is hungry. The snow hasn't melted. If anything, it has grown deeper overnight, swallowing the path outside your door and muffling every sound. The wind has gone still. Even the crows are gone. It feels as if the world itself is holding its breath. Your breath is visible in the dim morning light, and the fire has gone out again, leaving nothing but gray ash and silence. You sit up slowly, pulling your shawl tighter. The children are still sleeping, curled together like kittens for warmth. The stranger stirs near the hearth. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The stillness says everything. There's no food to warm, no pot to stir, no bread to break. You pour cups of water warm from resting near the firestones overnight and pass them around like a morning meal. The children sip, eyes down. You've never seen them like this quiet. Not afraid exactly. Just small. Smaller than they should be. Your thoughts turn toward the stranger's story from yesterday. The monastery. The cheese. The charity. The abbot with warm hands and soft words. Is it real? Is it reachable? You don't know. But staying here feels like waiting to die. By midday, the sky shifts. The wind rises. The snow turns to sleet, sharp and wet, sliding from the thatch in sheets. You take that as a sign, a mercy, a window. I'm going, you say, wrapping a cloth bundle with the last crust of bread, the smallest of your flat stones for heating, and a bit of ash for seasoning. You tell the stranger to watch the children. He nods once. No questions, just understanding. You lace your boots, such as they are more leather than shape, and step out into the storm. The snow sucks at your feet. The wind bites. But you walk. You pass fences that no longer stand, fields that once held cabbages, now blanketed in ice. You pass a cottage where no smoke rises from the chimney. You do not knock. Your breath comes in sharp gasps, and your thoughts begin to wander. You think of bread, fresh, steaming, torn by hand. You think of apples red and crisp. You think of stews that taste of salt and herbs and fat. Then you think of your children's faces, and you keep walking. You reach the edge of the woods by late afternoon. The path to the monastery is old, barely marked, but you remember hearing about it. A few miles past the river bend. You find the frozen stream and follow it, the wind behind you now pushing, pushing. You think about what you'll say if you make it there. You'll beg. You'll barter. You'll kneel if you must. You'll say their names. You'll show them the cuts on your fingers, the hollows in your cheeks, the dust in your sack. You'll tell them the truth: you need food. Not for you, though you do, but for your children and for tomorrow. As you climb a low ridge, the snow clears just enough to see it, a stone wall dark and square against the white. Beyond it, the tips of chapel towers, smoke rising from chimneys. You don't let yourself smile yet, not until you're inside. You knock hard on this wooden gate. A slot opens. Eyes, then a pause. Then the gate creaks open just wide enough to let you pass. The warmth hits you like a prayer. Inside, it smells of wood smoke and sheep. The brothers don't ask questions at first. One leads you to a bench by the fire. Another offers a bowl broth, thick and hot with barley and bits of dried meat. You take it with both hands, trembling. The first spoonful burns your tongue. The second makes your eyes sting. You eat every drop. When you finish, the monk speaks. He asks about your home, your children, the others in your village. You answer slowly, your voice hoarse. You tell him about the bones, the ash, the silence. You don't ask for charity. You just tell the truth. He nods, stands, and disappears. When he returns, he carries a bundle. Wrapped in waxed cloth cheese, hard and sharp. A small round loaf. Dried pears, salt, and oats. You try to thank him, but he raises a hand. "We are only sharing what was given to us," he says. He walks you back to the gate. You tuck the bundle close to your chest and begin the walk home. It's dark now, but you know the path. When you reach the cottage, the children are still huddled by the fire. The stranger sits near the coals, staring at the ash. When they see the bundle, they don't cheer. They just reach carefully, slowly. You unwrap the food like treasure. The cheese smells sharp. The bread faintly sour. The pears leathery but sweet. You portion everything by hand, every crumb accounted for. No one says much. There's only chewing, only breathing, only the sound of life returning. You eat your own portion last, as always. You let the cheese sit on your tongue. Let the pear soften in your mouth. Let the bread crumble between your teeth. You don't cry. But inside, something breaks open like the thawing of frozen earth. You whisper thanks, not to the monks, not to the food, but to the fire still burning in you. Tomorrow you will ration. Tomorrow the hunger may come again. But tonight you have eaten, and tonight you are alive. The wind has changed. It no longer carries the sharp, glassy bite of snow, but something softer, damp, earthy, the faint hint of thaw. When you step outside that morning, the path crunches under your boots instead of swallowing them. You see mud peeking through the ice. A single bird calls from the eaves. Spring is still a distant dream, but something in the air has shifted. You feel it in your lungs. Inside, the children sleep with full bellies for now. The stranger has gone, leaving behind only the indent in the straw where he lay, and a single wooden spoon carved by hand. You wrap it in cloth and keep it. Not because you need another spoon, but because in this world kindness is a relic. You unwrap the monk's bundle again. What remains is precious: a small wedge of cheese, a fistful of oats, 3 slivers of dried pear. It must last. You won't waste it. You stir the oats into water and slice the cheese into the thinnest pieces your knife can manage. As the pot simmers, the scent rises, nutty, rich, comforting. You sprinkle in a pinch of salt from the bottom of the bundle and feel like royalty. The children wake, noses twitching. Their eyes brighten when they see what's in their bowls. The cheese has melted into the oats, turning the gruel into something else entirely. Something close to decadence. They eat slowly, reverently. No one speaks. They know not to. After breakfast, you take a moment by the hearth. You look into the coals and remember all the meals you've made from almost nothing. Bark paste, bread baked with ash, soup with no vegetables, broth from bones boiled to dust. Every bite bought with labor, risk, and often pain. But you also remember the small victories, the wild garlic, the bit of salt, the fish from the stream, the cheese from the monks, a stolen crust, a shared crust, a crust refused so that a child might eat instead. You recall the days when hunger twisted your spine and turned your thoughts into fog. The days you saw things move in the corner of your vision, hallucinations born of starvation. The nights you dreamed of banquets and woke up biting your own hand. But you also remember the stranger's song, the warmth of broth shared with old Maud, the way the children smiled at the scent of onion. You remember laughter, brief, brittle, but real, over a hard crust dipped in hot water. And you remember the sound of a bite that satisfies. Food in the world you live in is never neutral. It's a statement, a plea, a punishment, a prayer, and you have survived it. You wrap the remaining cheese in cloth and hide it beneath the hearthstone, not out of greed, but because it must last. You'll use it again when spirits falter, when another snow comes, or when the children fall silent too long. The sun creeps across the sky like a hand brushing a table. You open the door and step outside. The village is still quiet, but not dead. Smoke rises from chimneys. Someone is singing a lullaby, faint and slow. You check your garden. Beneath the snow, a few stubborn green shoots have returned. Chives, perhaps. Maybe chickweed. Your hands move automatically, brushing away ice, coaxing the earth back to life. Later, you boil water again and steep a few dried herbs, a tea of sorts. The children drink it like it's wine. It warms their hands. Their cheeks are flushed. You think again about the nobles who waste their bread, who throw meat to dogs and scoop marrow for sport. You think about their gold-draped tables, and you no longer envy them, not in the same way, because they've never wept over a crust, never turned bones into soup, never fed 5 mouths with 1 onion. You have. You tuck the children in at dusk, stomachs, settled skin warm. You sit near the fire and watch the light flicker against the walls. You sip the last of the tea and imagine what the world would be if food were fair. If no child cried from hunger, if no mother had to choose between her own portion and her son's. But imagining is not surviving. So you dream, then plan. Tomorrow you will return to the woods. The ground will be softer. Roots will stir. The world will begin again as it always does, with hunger and hope walking hand in hand. And this time you are ready, because you've endured the season of nothing. You've made food from scraps. You've carved joy out of ash. And you've learned the truth. In the Middle Ages, cuisine wasn't food. It was punishment. But it was also resilience. And you somehow have survived both. Let your body settle now. The fire is low, but it's still warm, still glowing, still alive like you. Your stomach may be quiet, your limbs heavy, your eyes slowly closing. But your mind still holds the echoes of what you've walked through tonight. You've stepped into a world where food was a struggle, not a pleasure. Where bread was hard and soup was thin, where feasts were for the few and hunger was for the many. You've seen what it meant to survive in the shadows of castles, to boil bark into broth, to scrape marrow from bones, to stretch a single onion across a week. But you've also tasted the rare sweetness of a dried pear, the warmth of shared soup, the gift of a crust handed without words. Even in the bleakest places, you found slivers of kindness, a neighbor's song, a monk's bundle, a stranger's silence. And now you're here, not hungry, not cold, just resting. Let the images fade of frost-bitten mornings and empty cupboards. Let your breath slow. Let your muscles soften. Let your chest rise and fall like the coals dimming into red, soft as ash. You're safe. You're warm. You've eaten. And in your dreams, may the tables always be full, the bread always soft, and the hunger always gone.